Hello everyone, and for today, we're going to take a look back of all the work we did on the speaker box build. That way we could share with you all the lessons that we learned from all the things we did wrong, because there were mistakes that were made down the line, and I want to share with you how to avoid them and how you could save some time and money. And some of these were really minor and easy things to avoid. And another thing we're going to go over is our temperature test. Some individuals have commented saying, hey, based on the amplifier location, you're going to have overheating issues. So this is something I want to test for and verify that we're going to be okay. So we're going to do an extensive test where we drove for over an hour with the bass going as hard as it can. And we're going to share with you those results and how everything turned out. And the last thing we're going to go over is the cost summary. This is probably one of the most important things about this build is what did everything cost? And we summed everything up in a few categories. That way it's very easy to follow because we don't need to go over every little item that was purchased. You don't need to know the price of every little paintbrush or any cup that was used. So we'll go ahead and sum it up in a few categories. That way you can see if you want to do this build yourself. So let's get started. Alright, so the first thing I purchased was a digital thermometer with some thermocouples because I want to determine if this is really going to have overheating issues. So I'm going to take a piece of tape and tape one of the thermocouples right to the very top of the amplifier. This should give off the most heat right in this one spot right here. And then we'll turn it on, verify that we have a reading. Yep, that looks really good. So now I want to grab the second thermocouple and I want to tape it to the very top of the trunk. This is going to act as our control or our ambient temperature. So we're going to compare it to the temperature of the atmosphere in the trunk as well as the temperature of the amplifier. And let me pick up the camera that we can get a better view. And as you can see, it's just hanging in the air, and that should be perfect for this test. And then I'll feed the thermometer to the back seat and close her up. That way I can make this as close as possible to the normal driving conditions. And now that we started our drive, let's take a look. Looks like the amplifier is getting warm. Let's keep going. Yep, it's getting hot really quick. And this is with the bass going, and we tried it with the windows up and the windows down, the AC on and the AC off. Pretty much your normal driving conditions with the bass going as hard as it can. And it seems like the temperature's staying in the lower 100s, which is really good. Now, just as an FYI, you're going to see the hotter temperature swap between the top part of the meter and the bottom because I accidentally hit the wrong button when getting it out of sleep mode. And after extensive testing, these are results. It looks like the amplifier peaked at 106 degrees, which is really good because the manufacturer says we can go all the way up to 140 degrees during normal operating conditions. And it was actually pretty warm outside. It was 85 degrees outside. So overall, I think this test came out really good. I think we're safe to go ahead and keep using our amplifier and enjoying our nice sound system. Alright, so now I want to jump into the cost summary. I'm sure most of you are very curious, what did I spend on this whole project? And that's a very good question. And this is going to include everything. The diamond plating, the amplifier, the boxes, the speakers, everything. So let's go ahead and jump into the first item. And that's going to be the speaker boxes. So to build both boxes, just in material, cost me $349. That's the resin, the fiber, everything but the subwoofer. And the second item we built was the amplifier mount. So the mount was actually really cheap. It was $79, and majority of the price was just the diamond plating. Everything else was very cheap because it was mostly nuts and bolts. And for our least expensive category, we have our wiring material. Now this is going to include the amplifier wiring kit, the breaker, zip ties, little items we used just to do the whole wiring job, and it was at a whopping $65. And now for our most expensive category, we have our subwoofers and amplifier, and this is what pretty much brought up the cost of the whole build. The subwoofers alone cost $130 each, and the amplifier cost $200. Now some of you may already have these things, or you have another vendor that's cheaper. You're more than welcome to use whatever you like. And bringing all of our totals together, here's what we have. For our speaker box material, we have $349. For our amplifier mount material, $79. Wiring material, $65. Disposable material, $145. This includes your gloves, your mixable sticks, your cups, things that you're going to basically throw away. And then we have our speakers and amplifier, bringing it up to $460, summing everything together for almost $1,100 for this whole build start to finish. And please keep in mind the cost of these products are based on when these videos are made. Your cost will vary just based on market fluctuation. But I did leave a link of everything I used in the description below. So now we get to jump into our first of lessons learned. And the first thing I want to share with you is the fiberglass resin. I noticed when I was ordering resin, there were two different packages out in the market, and one was more expensive than the other. So I emailed 3M and the response was, it's the same product, just different packaging for different markets. That's all it is, so if you find one that's cheaper than the other, use it. And for our second lesson learned is the prep work for the fiberglassing. Now you may have noticed I used masking tape and created a hatch pattern. However, what I should have done was, I should have done 3 layers. Masking tape, aluminum foil, and then masking tape again. because when I was trying to remove the mold, I saturated too much resin inside the fabric and it started sticking to the carpet. It didn't ruin the carpet, but it stuck to it really good and it was really hard to get off. But if I put aluminum foil in between the layers, it only would have stuck to the aluminum foil and this would have came off very easy. So this was definitely a lesson learned and something I wish I did. And for our third lesson learned, it kind of contributes to our second lesson. On the driver's side, I tried to add a second layer of fiberglass while I was in the vehicle. I got overzealous and I was like, well, let me go ahead and try to add a second layer and thicken it up and try to save time. Unfortunately, it fought me because the fiberglass started getting very thick and heavy and started falling over. So that was definitely a big no-no, as well as it added so much resin, it started sticking to the carpet more. So it's just best if I did one layer of fiberglass and just let it harden. And also by doing just a single layer, I would have had less air bubbles. You would have seen later on in the videos that I had massive air bubbles in this area and it looked horrible. So by doing the one layer and flattening it out, this would have came out looking 10 times better. And for our fourth lesson learned, we're going to go over something that's not typically mentioned in a lot of fiberglass videos. Now for this job, we did have the resin stick to the carpet, and unfortunately, that resin really attached to the fabric and it made a bad, potent smell. It smelled like resin for weeks. So the best way I addressed this was not only air out the vehicle, but using Meguiar's carpet and upholstery cleaner, and it helped clear out the smell greatly. And now for our fifth lesson learned, this one's going to be an easy one. When I went ahead and cut out the edges for the speaker boxes and trimmed off all that excess fiberglass, I used a marker to determine where my cutting edges are. I kind of went around and said, all right, I'm going to go ahead and mark it right here because this is a good stopping point. What I should have used was painter's tape. And by using the tape, it would have gave me straighter lines to guide my cuts, because towards the top of the box, you could see where I drew by hand where I should cut. But when I was cutting, it was actually starting to veer left to right a little bit. So my cuts would have looked a little more uniform. And for our last lesson learned, we have our sanding process. Now this was probably the most tedious job of the whole build. It was the most time consuming. And the reason being is because I was going through batteries and sandpaper. Buying the bulk of sandpaper was no problem, but the batteries did not last long at all. I should have got a corded sander, and that would have made this job a lot quicker instead of me waiting a day or two for the batteries to charge. Well, hopefully you enjoyed this build. I think it turned out looking really good and I had a fun time doing it. And if y'all have any comments, questions, or concerns, feel free to comment below. And if you'd like, hit the like button and subscribe.